In the interest of not putting our testing methodology in every efficiency test that we're going to do for the rest of time, figured we'd just make a video on how we do it so you guys can both get a more in-depth version of how we do our efficiency tests, as well as just saving time for our marker reviews. Now the first things first, the marker itself. In the case of the marker, we take it right out of the box, completely stock. No, we don't play with the first shot drop off. No, we do not change the dwell. If we get anyone's marker in, we reset it to factory. It's factory, it's stock. We don't do any bore sizing. So whatever the stock barrel is, that's what we use. We're interested in showing you guys what the marker is, completely stock. If you want to go and change your marker, well, of course, you can expect your efficiency will change along with it. When it comes to tanks, there's really only one standard, and that is the 68. I've used it for years, and it's still just what pretty much everyone gets and what everyone is recommended. As for regulators, perhaps the more important part, in our case, we use a Ninja V2. We used to use a V1, but now that the V2 is out, we're going to start using this one. The reason is we want our tests to be as representative of stuff you guys can actually buy and use, rather than just adhere to older technology. I don't think it's going to affect the results too much. The only difference between the V1 and the V2 is the ball. And that, while it does increase flow, like when was the last time you experienced shoot down in the last 5 years? Pretty much never. So it should have very little impact compared to our tests on older markers. But importantly, we are going to use the same V2 going forward. Some markers use different tanks. These are most commonly pumps, mag-fed markers. For those, we use a 13, also by Ninja, with a standard, not Pro regulator on it, which is going to be the standard, out of the box, 13 CI tank. But the methodology, other than that, is going to be exactly the same. Now perhaps the most important part, how we fill the tanks. We fill them slowly up to whatever their working pressure is, 4,500 PSI in this case, or 3,000 for the 13s. We fill them slowly off our cascade system. Now that might take 5 fills, it might take 10, but we're going to get them stable at the working pressure at whatever the temperature is in here at the time. Sometimes out of the year it'll be colder outside, sometimes it'll be warmer, but we can't really control that. But we can control what pressure we get these to. And we do that using this gauge. We get it calibrated periodically. It should be ±2. It is a very accurate digital gauge. It's a very good tool for it. Now, in this configuration here, we actually have it rigged up to test some regulators, but we do plumb it either to the tanks or to the markers as directly as possible so that there's not a lot of extra air that's wasted inside the gauge, actually, when it's sensing the pressure. We start the test by chronoing the marker with a Virtue clock at as close to 300 feet per second as we can without going over. Now we use a clock for a couple of reasons. The first, nice big numbers so you guys can see it. The other is since it's an off-the-shelf component, you guys could replicate the test using the same chronograph if you wanted. We could use a more expensive ballistic chronograph, but then you'd be hard pressed to get the same results. As for paint, we use whatever mid-grade paint we have handy at the time. We don't use super high-end or super low-end. And we do count up to the exact ball at the very end of the test. We also provide it in standard 140 round pods for those of you who don't want to do math, but we're not going to do it in mags or 10 round tubes or any other particular paintball holding measurement because I'm confident you guys know how to use a calculator. Now, the test will run until one of two conditions are met. Either the marker no longer shoots at above 220 feet per second, as read by our clock. The reason for that, 220 feet per second is about where we thought paint's not going to break on people unless you're right up in their face anymore. So that's just usually where we call it, and that's where it's been through all our videos. We don't want to run the marker completely dry, because those balls wouldn't break anyone, so they don't count. The other circumstance, in the case of something like this, a lot of markers will still shoot at full velocity right up until the point where they run out of air in the tank. That would be the other time we, of course, end the test because there's no air left. That's pretty much it for how we do our tests. If you guys have any questions on how we do them specifically, if there's anything that we didn't answer, please email us at support@hustlepaintball.com.